Welcome again to another edition of Drummer Nation, the show for and about drummers where we talk about all things related to drums and drumming. And I have pleased to have again my honorable co-host, partner in crime, Adam Nussbaum. How are you today?
Staying on this side of the grass and glad.
Happy you are. Me too. Uh, and a very, very special guest who I'm just meeting. I've known his work forever and admired his playing. And I hear he's a really nice guy. So Billy Drummond is in the
Hello,
house.
hello. Thank you for having me, Michael. And
Oh, it's my
Nussbaum, my man, Adam Nussbaum. We go back a few years,
I
that's for
think you
sure.
do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like to get into some background stuff, but then talk about, drums and drumming and music.
Okay,
Because
yeah,
we're musicians who happen to be drummers, right?
that's right. Yeah,
So you started at a very young age, didn't you?
that's what they say. Yeah. That's what they say. Yep.
Were you would you say you were a musical prodigy as a child?
No, no. I don't know. I just gravitated towards the drums.
How
Basically because
old were you, Billy?
my father had been a drummer, but he had stopped playing by the time I came along. And so, and he was also a jazz guy. He had, uh, looking back on it, he had a really nice jazz record collection. And so he would play music in the house all the time. So, I just kind of gravitated towards what he was kind of into because I was a little boy and, my dad was doing this stuff and I just kind of was following him around, and he would be talking about the records he was listening to and drums with his friends. They'd get together and, they'd talk about, records and this guy and that guy and so on and so forth like that.
And what was the time frame of this?
Well, this is about, I guess, technically like, early 60s. I was born in the late 50s. So
Mhm.
62, 63,
Okay.
around at that time is
So
when I
so the records
started.
were mostly jazz music, I presume, right?
Yeah, pretty much all jazz music. My sister, who's 6 years older than me, was into the music that a teenage girl was into, or
Mhm.
by that point when she kind of had was had records and stuff too. So she was into her thing. So I was kind of hearing music from that side and music from my parents' side, my father and my mother's side. So it was a good, healthy dose of looking back on it now, really
Mhm.
fantastic music.
So who were the first drummers that caught your attention
Well,
from your
uh,
dad's record collection, let's say?
well, the interesting thing about that is my dad was always talking about Max Roach. Well, his favorite drummer, I think, of all time was Chick Webb, and my dad was born in 1925, so
Hmm.
he's of the same age group as 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 the drummers that he was listening to on records. My dad had the Horace Silver records and Sonny Rollins records and Miles and Jimmy Smith and Art Blakey and Jackie McLean and all that kind of stuff. So he was listening to those drummers on those records: Max Roach, Billy Joe Jones, Art Blakey. So he was born in that same general area. He's born in 25, like Roy Haynes is born in 25, I believe. Max is born 24. Philly Joe's 23. So my dad was the age of those guys. And he was listening to those guys too, because he liked bebop, he liked Charlie Parker.
Hmm.
But he always would talk to me about Big Sid Catlett and Chick Webb. And I
Had he
guess,
ever seen them?
yeah, he saw Chick Webb. I don't think he saw Sid.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
And it's funny because uh, one time my dad took me and a couple of my friends to see the Billy Cobham George Duke band. And this was when I was a teenager. So Billy Cobham was he was it, he was it at that time for me and my friends and all that kind of stuff with, Spectrum and Mahavishnu and all that sort of thing. And we were just that's we were into fusion stuff, fusion guys a lot at that time. So when my dad took us to see Billy Cobham, George Duke band, and Billy was just, at that time, he was just 1975 or six, somewhere around in that period. And so we all went. My dad went too, and at the end of the concert, we were driving home, and all of us, we were all just giddy with excitement because we had just seen the greatest thing we had ever seen in our lives at that point. And and so I said, "So, Dad, what did you think? What did you think about Billy Cobham? What did you think? It was great." And he goes, "Well, he was pretty good, but he ain't no Chick Webb." So that's, everybody kind of has their perspective, from where they've been sitting,
Right.
and it's like that, I think, with myself and Adam, because what we saw, the people that are coming up now didn't see. So they have a
Right.
whole, everybody has a whole different perspective based on the information that they've received. I think
Oh, I
that's
think
what it
so.
seems to me. That's
Oh,
what it
sure.
seems to me
Sure.
when I talk to the younger drummers, because they have their references, and I look at it and go, well, yeah, but
Pretty good, but he's no. It's
yeah,
fascinating because it's a fascinating scenario because I always ask people, and I'm curious, who affected you in what I call the Wonder Bread years,
yeah,
when you're very impressionable.
yeah.
And, those first people you get to see, it has a deep impact on you and
Oh,
your
yeah,
perspective about how you see things. I remember seeing, the first Lifetime band, and that was something, when I saw
absolutely.
that, it's like, wow. And then, out of curiosity, I think, what happened with me, and I'm sure most of us who have got a deep passion for this music have done it. You check somebody out, and then you want to check out who they checked out.
Hmm.
You want to go down into the roots of the
Hmm.
origin. And
Hmm.
it's just fascinating. I mean, I just think of, we'd sit next to our heroes, and then they would see our enthusiasm and they could remember when they would sit next to theirs.
Exactly. That's
Right.
right.
Like
Yeah.
when Elvin would talk about hearing Chick Webb, that was very defining for him. Or
Right.
Katz talking about, Ed Shaughnessy talking about sitting next to Big Sid. So, we were, fortunate to get to sit next to so many of who was around, in town, you
Exactly.
know. So
Exactly.
it's fascinating. So when you were growing up, I mean, because it was your dad,
Hmm.
that's one thing, you don't always listen to what your parents have to say, but if
Hmm.
somebody else tells you the same thing, then maybe you remember it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who
Well,
were
well,
some
well,
of the other people growing up around where you grew up? It was in Virginia, right?
that's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, actually, getting back to the thing about my dad, he was listening to those guys I was saying, Max and Philly Joe and Art Blakey,
Right.
and I was a little kid, and at that time, uh, for a little kid, TV was kind of everything. In the 60s, TV was that was your tunnel to worlds you didn't know about. And so on television, the drummer that was on television the most was, of course, Buddy Rich. And so the first, I don't know, 6 or 7 years of my life as a as a wannabe drummer, he was my favorite. He was my favorite drummer because he was on television. And so
He
my
was
dad would be,
exposed to everybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he was on television. And my dad had, he had the Buddy Rich Gene Krupa record, the Norman Grant's No Grand record, and I used to just look at the cover of that all the time because I like the picture, the drums, those two, they were kind of glued together like that. It's kind of translucent, and you could, the white marine pearl sling on the drum. Anyway, so he would play that for me at my request because I wanted to hear Buddy Rich, and so Buddy Rich was always on those, Johnny Carson, and it was the Hollywood Palace show, and all those Merv Griffin and
Mike Douglas, all
Mike
those shows.
Douglas,
Yeah.
all of that. Even Playboy After Dark. Remember that
Yeah.
show?
Yep.
Yeah. So my parents, if he was, we used to get the TV guide. The little it was a little thing. I'm sure you guys got that. The
Sure.
TV
Yeah.
guide,
Mhm.
and you can look in the TV guide every day. I don't know what the day it went from, maybe Sunday to Sunday,
They were weekly.
Sunday to
Yeah.
Saturday. Yeah. So you can look. And I knew that the Tonight Show would come on at, like, I don't know, 11:30 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, which was on a school night, that was not permissible for me to stay up that late. When I was, I'm talking about when I was in first grade, second grade, third grade, blah blah blah. Um, so I would look it through there, and if I saw that he was going to be on, I would ask my parents for permission to stay up and watch it. And so I would. I would stay up and watch it just to see him, because he'd come out and sit on the, chair next to, the couch next to, like, I don't know,
Movie stars.
Don Rickles and, some
Yeah.
Hollywood actress or something. And he'd come out and, do his thing with Johnny. And then, okay, you're going to play some drums? Yeah, I'll play. And then he'd go up and he'd either play just a drum solo or play with the band or whatever, And I was just, gobsmacked with him.
Mm-hmm.
He was my hero, and because he was the most visible person, and of course, Max and Philly Joe and Art Blakey, they were definitely not on television. so
Right.
so that was the guy for me, because he was on television, and of course, looking back on it now, he was incredible. He was a phenomenal drummer. And later on, of course, I didn't follow in that direction in terms of music that he played basically. But I still, man, I can OD on this guy anytime. If I start watching him on YouTube, it's like, oh man, I spent 2 hours,
I did that yesterday.
It's undeniable.
Yeah.
He's undeniable with his ability and things like that. And he was turned into a celebrity,
right,
by his exposure.
right.
And yeah, I mean, it was pretty amazing. When did you start playing with people, like in a group situation?
Well, I was playing in like I guess you would call it like a, they used to call it soul music. We played soul music in my neighborhood. There was a bunch of kids in my neighborhood that were musicians. So I had a band called the Dynamics. And I was 9 years old or something, 10 years old. And there was other guys in the neighborhood that played. And so we would play like block parties and talent shows.
And the repertoire was like Motown and
like
Memphis and all that stuff.
Not Memphis, mainly like let me think. What would we be playing? We would be playing stuff like I don't know, like James Brown and Kool and the Gang and that kind of stuff like that.
R&B of its day, yeah.
The R&B of its day, yeah. And we really kind of gravitated later on when I was about, I don't know, 10 or 11, maybe even before that. We gravitated towards those bands because at that time, a lot of bands, even R&B bands, soul bands, they were actually playing instruments. They weren't just, it wasn't just singing. We weren't into so much just the singing groups. It was the bands that had instrumentalists playing and singing at the same time. So Sly and the Family Stone, Graham Central Station, Mandrill, War. So now we're getting more like maybe the late 60s, maybe 70, 71. And that's what we were kind of, drawn to because they were, they were singing pop, like hit songs that were on, especially, black radio, because it was real segregated down there. So there was black radio station and white radio station. And so we all listened to of course, we listened to the black radio station and they would play like, that stuff. And we loved that stuff. And that's how we ended up getting into the fusion thing, because now there was virtuosos playing these same instruments that we were playing, electric bass and so, I don't know, Stanley Clark and so that's how it kind of gravitated towards that.
So it all melded together.
It
The
all melded
jazz
together,
stuff and the
yeah.
pop and rock and R&B stuff of the time.
Right, plus the jazz stuff, because my dad was still
Mhm.
listening to the jazz stuff, and he would take me to concerts. I remember seeing the Ramsey Lewis Trio when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and the drummer turned out to be later on the lead singer in one of my favorite bands was Maurice White.
Right, Earth, Wind and Fire.
Yeah, with Earth, Wind and Fire. So, and when we went to see Ramsey Lewis, my dad took me up and let me meet Maurice White, and he let me, sit down on his drum set. And I remember clearly that it struck me that he was a man, a real grown man, but he had a little drum. To me, what seemed like a little drum set like mine, because he had an 18-inch bass drum.
Mhm.
And, and I was like, wow, but they were professional drums. Mine still were, well, at that time, if you didn't have money for a professional brand drum set, like a Ludwig or Slingerland or Gretsch or Rogers or whatever, everybody had like drums that were made in Japan. Like my drums at that time were called Zimgar. You ever heard of that? Zimgar?
Of course.
I had
Zimgar, Kent,
Kent.
Ajax. There was a
Stewart.
bunch of those.
I had a
Yeah.
Zimgar snare. My first snare drum was a Zimgar.
Yeah. So that was my drum set, but it was, it was small. It was small size for a
Mhm.
9-year-old, 8-year-old. And so Maurice White, I believe it was a Ludwig jazzette. And it was a 12 by 18-inch bass drum.
Mhm.
And I thought that was so, wooden finish, I don't know if they were walnut or something like that, really. Anyway, that was one of the first things that I saw, where I saw a real,
Jazz drum.
from out of town jazz drummer. Yeah.
All right.
Now
when you were in,
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Now, I know Genus is from down there, James Genus, the wonderful
That's right.
bassist.
That's
So
correct.
were you guys connected back then?
No, I didn't even know him until
Okay.
I came to New York, and
Okay.
he came to New York. I knew
was-
Steve Wilson.
Right. Who were
The
some of the other
saxophone player.
cats? Right.
Well, in my neighborhood, the kind of the stars of my neighborhood were the Wooten brothers,
Okay.
and they lived right around the corner from me, and so me and the drummer were best friends at that time. Roy, they call him Future Man now, but Roy was. So they had like a family band that was kind of like across, like kind of like the Jackson Five.
Hmm.
And their parents would take them around to like NCO clubs, because there was a lot of military installations in that area, naval bases and Army bases and Langley Air Force Base. And then, then down in North Carolina, there were some as well. So they would take them around, because they were like an act. They were they had like a show, and all of them played, different instruments. Victor was, I don't know, I met Victor when he was like 7 years old. He was already playing
Yeah,
great.
they played them very well.
Yeah, they were already, all of them were, so Roy and I were drum buddies. And so we were into, when he was one of the. That's who my parents took. My father took to see Billy Cobham was me and Roy,
Mm.
and I think Reggie, the guitar player, and maybe Rudy, the sax player, who's no longer with us. But that's who he took. He took us to, and we would go. We went and saw. I think it was Return to Forever. Uh, we went and saw. I'm
With
trying
Lenny
to think
White.
of. Yeah, we saw Lenny. Yeah, Lenny White with Return to Forever.
Mm.
So we were starting to go see, the
Mm.
people that we could see, because down there wasn't that much professional jazz activity, except for the Hampton Jazz Festival every year, and then occasionally there would be something at Hampton Institute, which is now Hampton University, and that's where I saw Roy Brooks and the Artistic Truth when I was about 13. That was my dad took me to see him
Was
because
he
he was
doing the
on.
breathe tone?
He was doing the breathatone, and yeah, man, and he was real nice to
This,
me. And I remember he wrote his. I had just come from my snare drum lesson, and so I had my Wilcoxon book with me and my practice pad and my sticks, and he saw my Wilcoxon book and immediately said, "Oh, that's Philly Joe. That's Philly Joe works out of that book." And he wrote his name and his New York address on my Wilcoxon book on the inside cover. But I don't know. I don't have it anymore. I don't know what happened to it. I have another copy now. But anyway, that was great seeing him. He had the breathatone drums, and it was.
for
And
people that don't know, Roy Brooks was an incredible drummer. He came out of Detroit. He was a little younger than Elvin and Lou Hayes.
right,
He had the Horace Silver gig,
right,
and he was a very imaginative cat. He took tubes of like rubber hose or plastic hose and connected them to the air vents in his drums.
that's right.
And he could breathe into them and change the pitch. And
That's right.
a wonderful musician, and unfortunately he's passed away. But yeah,
Yeah.
he was something. He could really play,
He
man.
could really play. Yeah,
I
he could
never
really.
heard it.
And I
Well,
ended
if
up
you
doing.
came out of Detroit, you could play.
Yeah, and I ended up experimenting doing that because my dad at that time had an aquarium, and so and the aquarium, the pump inside the aquarium at that time was connected with these plastic hoses to something else, some machine outside of the tank itself or whatever. And so he had a kind of
I got to
a
run off for 1 second. I'll be right back. Just got a
okay,
family call. Go ahead. Do your
okay.
thing.
Yeah, we'll carry on.
Okay, he had a supply of those tubes, those like tubes,
Hmm.
plastic tubes. So I stuck them in the vent holes of my drums and kind of taped them up so no air would escape, so that I could do my Roy Brooks breathatone imitation.
That's cool. Well, you've
Yeah,
given
yeah.
us a great idea of the prism that you've formed your own style from. So all these drummers you've mentioned, you play like you. You don't play like them. And when did you begin to fashion that?
Wow, I don't know. I guess I'm still fashioning it now.
Lifelong process.
Yeah. It's just uh, the experiences of just being a musician, uh, um, playing in all kinds of different situations, playing in school,
Hmm.
playing, listening to records, going out to hear people play, talking to people.
What?
Just living as a working musician. It kind of
Mm,
all of it is what you are is a culmination of all those things from day
right.
to day. I guess
And
anyway.
what I'm hearing, like, I love your playing, man. It's so loose and open and flowing, and you generally play in a modern style where you don't like. There's no constant, right? You're not playing ding a ding a ding ding a ding continuously. The hi hat's not on two and four continuously. It's highly interactive on four limbs, And I just find that style of drumming fascinating. And we have a lot of like young people who watch this who may not be aware of how
Hmm.
that comes together.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I gravitated towards that aesthetic concept of playing because of the music that I liked and still do like. And so the drummers that were responsible for creating that music and playing the music that the way that they did, those were the people that I gravitated to
Well, let me
at
play
the
something.
time.
Let me play something I found from on your website. There's nothing constant. It's all flowing on all four limbs.
Okay, yeah, I guess so, right?
Try to have more fun when you're playing.
If I
You
don't
know,
have fun, it's not really.
the other thing I jumps out right away at me is just the joy of what you're doing. It's in your face, man. You're that's a
Well,
wonderful that's a wonderful thing to bring to the bandstand.
yeah, and when that happens, it makes it all worthwhile, you know. So, that's what I kind of live for. I think we all live for that thing because sometimes it's not that. And
Hmm.
you're really like not, maybe not having a great time, or you're frustrated about this, that, or the other, or the situation doesn't lend itself to uh, joy or whatever, you know. But
Hmm.
um,
Now, when you're
um,
playing I mean, you've worked with a million legends. I won't detail them all because you have a wonderful website that lays that out. Are there times when you can play that way and times when you can't?
absolutely, yeah, yeah. There's times when that particular thing that you just showed, that was quite a long time ago. But that was a band that I put together. So when on the rare occasion that I get a chance to lead my own band, I try to surround myself with people that I know I'm going to have a good time playing with. I'm not going to be frustrated with this, that, or the other.
Mm.
In other words, the only thing that could really botch things would be me. so, so, so if I can get over that hump, then I'm going to have a good time. And actually, surrounding myself with those kinds of people helps me. It kind of, it lifts me up. So it's easier for me to have a good time because I'm supported by their talents, you know what I'm saying? Like that. So
Sure.
yeah, but sometimes you play with people or play with groups, I'm sure you, Michael, and I know Nussbaum, we're kind of in New York here,
Hired guns.
hired guns. We're
Yeah.
like, okay. And so we have to go into these situations and play the role of the drummer and fit into whatever uh
Hmm.
aesthetic that the group has or that the leader has or whatever that whole thing is.
And
And
that's where that prism comes from. I mean, where you had all that musical past of all those
mm,
different styles you assimilated, and then it comes
mm,
through the prism and you make it fit to the music.
Right, and that's part of, I think, being well, I came to New York because I wanted to be a New York jazz drummer. I did. That was what I saw as uh as a noble thing, because the people that I loved to listen to were that, for the most part. They were, even the people that my dad was listening to, they were that. And all the
Mhm.
people that came after them were that, and the people that
You
I
play what the
gravitated toward.
music is. You play
Yeah,
what the music is, and our job is to help whoever is hiring us feel good.
exactly. That
And it's
exactly.
not about it's not about us bringing it's not what I want, it's what does the music want.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
like you said, when you have the right people there that you can trust and you have a similar well that you're all drawing from,
Hmm.
it's easy to go to those kind of places. But then again, we may play with people of slightly different stylistic bent, and we
Hmm.
have to have enough range in our abilities and our sensibility
Hmm.
to do what's appropriate. I mean, the way you'd play with Nuke is not the way you'd play with Lee Konitz. And but they still want to feel support,
Hmm.
and these things are important. And you brought up a good point. Everyone that your dad listened to, everyone that we listened to, they could go in and play appropriately for the music and
Hmm.
set the ego aside to fulfill the responsibility. And I
Hmm.
think that's why, you've been able to work, I've been able to work,
Hmm. Hmm.
because it's not about me, it's
Right.
about we.
Hmm.
It's a team. And I just think, it's so important for young drummers to get out and play with people. So much now people are getting brainwashed by what they're seeing on YouTube and all this stuff, and
Hmm.
like it's drum Olympics. That's not making music. That's something different.
Hmm.
But don't
Hmm.
don't confuse that with making music. Music is a social process that we have to do with others.
Yeah,
And
exactly
you
right.
have to get these together, and you can't practice getting this together by yourself. I mean, of course you can listen to the right records, get the right information, but to be on the bandstand, that's invaluable experience. I mean, I know for me, I learned more when I got fired from a gig than when I got hired.
We've all
And
been there. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pain of the initial thing was a drag, but then it's like, how can I turn this into something positive where I
Hmm.
learn something?
Yeah, they must have
Sure.
had a point, right? Maybe I didn't get it at the time, but they must have had a point, and I have to
Yeah,
learn from that and become a better drummer.
yeah.
Which is a great transition to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. You're a an educator, right?
Yep.
And you're teaching it. Are you still at Juilliard?
Yeah, Juilliard and NYU.
Great.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, are we finding lots of great young talented kids to come through these programs?
Sure. Yeah. There's a
Hmm.
lot. There's a lot of very talented um, drummers and other instrumentalists that come through, and I mean, and you usually end up hearing about them shortly thereafter they get out, or even during the time
Hmm.
they're at school. A lot of them are already. Well, the way the situation is now, the younger the better in terms of
What I hear.
promotion and publicity and
All
all that
right.
kind of stuff, which is a whole nother bag. But yeah, but there's some really talented
Hmm.
musicians that are coming up.
I'm sure they're delighted to have you. What do you have like a central teaching philosophy, or is there certain books you work out of, or core principles?
Let's see. Well, I kind of take it case by case. Um, Certainly with the drummers. I don't have a book thing because I didn't take drum set lessons myself, or jazz drum set lessons or anything like that. I took snare drum, like
Mhm.
the Wilcoxon, like I mentioned, Podimsky, uh,
Right.
Fred Albright,
Cerrone, maybe.
Cerrone,
Yeah.
right? Pratt, John S.
Mhm.
Pratt, all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff.
Gardner.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, but I didn't ever take jazz drums, any kind of drum set lessons. So I can't, um, honestly, I'd be a charlatan if I was teaching out of the Chapin book or something, because I don't even know how to, I don't know anything
Mhm.
about that. I don't know how to,
Well,
I didn't do that myself. So I kind of just teach them based on case by case situations, because there's such a wide span of the level, you know, uh, of the drummers that you get. Some drummers just need some nuts and bolts stuff, like they don't know. I don't want to. I'm not trying to be negative, or but yeah, they sometimes they come in, and I have a list of questions to ask them about their history, especially if they're coming in as a freshman, and even sometimes as master's students. If they come in from some other school from around the country, I'll ask them certain questions, and a lot of times I get a lot of yeah, I transcribed Elvin and Tony Williams, and
great.
I hear that a lot, and then okay, so let's hear a five-stroke roll. Is that
Mhm.
that kind of stuff? And then so some of them need like some just some they because I think that most of the people that like we all love, and ourselves included, have learned how to play the drums reasonably well. Just play the drums, just play the instrument well. And all the people that we love can play the instrument really well, having nothing to do with perhaps jazz. I think
Mhm.
their command of playing the instrument is really, I mean, Philly Joe Jones or Elvin Jones, they can really play the instrument really well. Now, what they do with their audacious creativity in the jazz world is something completely different. But so I have to sometimes hold their feet to the fire with, man, you can't really, you have no ability to play the drums. How are you going to even approach playing this music with some sort of facility if you can't do a roll, or understand uh, the, the the systematic patterns of doubles and singles, lefts and rights, i.e. the rudiments, and stuff like that, because you're never going to be able to play anything that Max Roach plays, or Lewis
Mhm.
Hayes plays, or someone like that.
But I
And
imagine you don't
other
have many
people.
students like that at Juilliard that don't have
Well, they
those
they
pieces
still
together.
some of them still need to focus on that at the same time that they're
Mhm.
that they're dealing with what they have to deal with to play in the
Mhm.
ensembles at the school and all that kind of stuff, and knowing the history of the drums. A lot of them don't know much of the history that they need to know. They know like the history that's now.
That's what I was getting at. There seems to be with kids of a certain age, people born in this century seem to be unaware of the 20th century.
Well, they're aware of certain things because certain things are just kind of like blah, that everybody talks about. But there's a lot of other stuff that they don't know about, and not just the drumming, but just the music.
Right.
There's been so much music that has been recorded and played that they have no idea about, and so they're distorted with thinking that everything that's happening now is brand spanking new, and most of the time
It
it's
is.
it's not, or it's very derivative of something that that we would have known about that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, 30 years that was happening 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, so most of them are very, very receptive when I turn them on to, you need to check the gene, and they don't know the names, they don't know the people, and they're kind of like, wow, I, you know, I didn't know anything about this,
Mm-hmm.
and
I
so,
find that it's fascinating that sometimes what we have to do is kind of be the tour guide.
right,
It's a good
right,
way to put it.
We got to hit them. Well, it's like, oh, you like this guy? Well, he's basically coming from these elements, you
yeah,
know? And what are elements? Sound, feel, vocabulary.
hmm
Certain guys, you like the sound, maybe you don't dig the vocabulary. Other guys, you love the vocabulary, you don't dig the swing. You mix it all up, you see how it's coming together, and it's really fascinating. It's like recently, I hear so many young saxophone players, they're starting with Coltrane 63, 64. John Coltrane didn't start like that.
hmm hmm
You know what I mean? You go back and listen to him in the early 50s, he's still trying to figure it out. You
hmm
don't start at the destination, you start at the beginning of a journey.
Right.
hmm
You need to understand certain principles about things. Bring them back to like learning how to play the cymbal, learning how
hmm
to get something together. It's like they're getting so brainwashed with hearing so much stuff now. It's like it didn't start here.
hmm
You didn't start running when you were a baby. You got
Mm-hmm.
up, you
hmm
fell down on your ass hundreds of times. Now
hmm
you don't think
hmm
about walking.
hmm
We don't want to be
Yeah.
thinking about anything. But,
Col-
this is what I find that, when you teach, you need to let them understand where things come from. I remember when Mavis Staples from the Staples Singers got the Kennedy Center Award. I love what she said. She went up and she said, she was talking about her father. She said, Pops built the foundation. We just working on the building. And this is pretty much where things are at. What did
mm-hmm.
Max say about Papa Joe Jones? For every 3 beats a drummer plays, 5 come from Papa Joe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on,
yeah, yeah,
Coltrane didn't start playing Interstellar Space.
no kidding.
Took a long time to get to that.
yeah,
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 it's
Well,
a
exactly.
process, and I think as a teacher, you really have a responsibility to like you
mm-hmm.
said, you got to hit them to the right stuff.
hmm
Point them in the right. Yes, this is cool,
Mm-hmm.
and because nowadays, there's so much information out there,
It's very
and
daunting.
a
It
lot
is
of it
daunting.
is more style than substance,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of wrong stuff being, perpetrated out there. And that's why you still need a teacher and people still need mentors. As I say, you need the tour guide, baby. You got to
hmm
have it. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we have
Yeah.
these kids coming up because this is exactly what I was getting at, that they need to know their history because they have kids who have amazing technical facility, right? I mean, they got double, triple, quadruple pedals. They could do more stuff with their feet than I can do with my hands. They're like on the feet. And
hmm
it comes out like, okay, that's cool, but how does it make music?
Who's going to
hmm
hire them?
And that's not trying to be negative because they have a lot together, man.
Right.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what's your whole point? If you're playing this instrument, for me, it was always trying to make music with others
Hmm.
and trying to be part of that community and part of, like, we're like part of a tribe here.
Hmm.
How we can work together with our fellow man and help each other out, the sense of, humanity and working together, finding kumbaya with others.
Yeah, exactly
you
right.
know this
Exactly.
is it's a process, but when I just wonder where all these youngsters now are going to gain experience on the bandstand
Right.
Mm.
beyond. I know we all learned playing with elders. It's one thing to play with your friends, and that's great, and that's part of the process. But
Hmm.
then to get those opportunities, to be able to play with somebody like a Ron Carter or a Sonny or a Bobby Hutcherson or a Tommy Flanagan, I mean, that's really where I learned the most was
Hmm.
in those situations as far as playing. I mean, I hear all these kids, they got more chops than I could ever dream of, but if we go to an audition, I'm probably going to get the gig.
That's exactly what I was going to get at. We
you
talked
know,
to, we had Billy Cobham on the show recently. We had Chester Thompson, and those guys were both known for lots of notes and big kids. And I asked them about these young kids, and they were like, yeah, saying the same thing we are. We played all those notes and all those big kids for a reason, because it fit the music. The music came first, not the big kid and all. Zappa was writing stuff for 10 tom-toms, you know, and Mahavishnu and stuff like that was, he called for it.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
But they both kind
yeah,
of made the same point we were just doing, and they were sort of
yeah,
the originators, especially Billy.
yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. Ooh, man, during that time, boy, he was, uh, he was something else, man. He
Yeah,
still is something else. I
still is.
mean, wow. Yeah,
He's 80 years
God
old,
bless
man.
him, man. Yeah,
yeah,
He still looks great, still plays great, and he's very humble.
yeah, yeah. I got, I, he sat in on a couple of gigs that I was on I think it was in Zurich because he lives in between Zurich and Bern or something. At least he was at that
Yeah, he's
time.
in Switzerland.
Yeah, and I was over there playing, and he came to the gig. I think uh, Abercrombie was on the gig, so he came to see John,
Hmm.
and he sat in, and it was great just hearing him on my setup, which is not
Hmm.
15 tom toms and double bass, but he just played so tastefully and just clean as a whistle, and just oh man, it was just
that must have been sweet, man.
oh, it was just so hip, man. It was just so hip, he's so nice, man. Another time I had been over there and I was on the way home. I was in the airport, like just in the waiting area, and I see this cat walking, and I was like, as he gets closer and closer, I'm like, that looks like Billy Cobham. And sure enough, it was. He came right up to me and started talking. It was great, and we've spent the whole plane trip on the way back to New York talking. He was telling me all kinds of stories and when he was living in New York and just being, he wanted to be a studio drummer. He was
Hmm.
saying,
Hmm.
that's what his goal was. He wanted to be it. And that whole Mahavishnu thing kind of, he just like, oh yeah, they called me to come, John called me to play and boom, next thing you know.
Well, he earned it. He deserved it.
Yeah, he certainly did, man.
I mean, that was the right combination of people. Like any really great band, it was
Right.
the chemistry of
Oh,
those
wow.
five cats, man.
Yeah.
Woo!
And aren't we lucky to reap the sonic rewards that we get from listening to that stuff over and
I
over and
mean,
over again?
hearing that, I remember hearing that band live up in Westport, Connecticut. I was in high school, went to Staples High School. Mahavishnu played, and it was like, you know, it was it was just, you never heard anything like it.
Oh man,
And
yeah.
and and what I love too is besides just the unbelievable virtuosity was just to witness the depth of commitment when
Yeah,
these cats were playing. And I think that's something we've seen when we've seen any of our iconic people. When they sit
sure.
down, that intention and that focus,
Yeah.
whether it's burning out or playing a ballad, whatever, just to be so in there, you
Yeah.
know,
They
Hmm.
that's
all they all have it, man. I saw Sinatra in Vegas, and he commanded the room, man. He just came on. You couldn't believe he was there. You're like,
Right.
yeah,
oh my God,
Right.
there he is.
yeah.
Well, Billy, you've been a wonderful guest. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Um,
Thank you for having me, man.
we've got some ideas to do a continuing show with you and someone else. We'll leave that as a little teaser until it happens.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add on here? Either of you?
No, I whatever, and I'm here to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. So I wanted to ask you. I know you said you were a cymbal maker.
Yeah, I got around 2004. I bought the rights and the firm for Bosphorus cymbals, and that was my
Wow.
brand for maybe 8 or 9 years. And then I eventually formed my own brand, Crescent, and I sold it to Sabian. So I
Oh,
got in and I got out cleanly, and
did you
did
did
okay.
you actually did you actually work in the factories of these places?
Well,
And
I went there many, 15, 20 times, but I mean, I didn't swing the hammer too much. Those
okay.
guys know what they're doing.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, you think you know symbols till you're talking to a guy with a cymbal with a hammer in his hand, and you can't just say make it a little more this or that. Where do you hit it? How
Right.
hard do you hit it? What do you do? Where is it thick? Where is it thin? Do you hammer the bell, the underside? Bing, bada bang, bada boom, and then working with the artist. I really love that part. I kind of miss that, but we had a good run there with Bosphorus.
Wow. Are they still around,
Oh yeah,
Bosphorus?
they are. We're not associated with them, but I had several artists that we kind of built the whole thing around. It was Jeff Hamilton, Stanton Moore, Jamie Haddad,
Mm-hmm.
Ignacio was involved there for a while. Uh, Dennis McCrell, Ollie Jackson. I don't know. We had a nice stable. Johnny Vodakovich.
Wow.
Um,
It's a
uh,
it's a good range of cats. Everybody's bringing a different perspective
yeah.
to the
Yeah.
pie, so they say.
Right.
Yeah.
The
I
pie. The pie.
remember I remember going to this was many years ago. I went to there was was there some kind of distribution center or something in London at one point?
Uh, I don't know about that. I wouldn't have been involved in that. I
Okay,
mean,
because I remember
I
going
mean,
there.
they saw. I didn't wasn't involved in the international distribution, but we designed all the symbols and all the marketing and
I
all that
see.
stuff.
Now, was Bosphorus, was that uh, an offshoot of the K-Zildjian
Oh
factory?
yeah, there's a can of worms there, man. From the old, yeah, it was, and it came from the old Istanbul factory, which split into Istanbul Agop, Istanbul Mehmet.
Correct.
Bosphorus
Right.
guys
Right.
had worked there in the past, and we made a little headway in the market, and then kind of opened the floodgates, and the internet helped a lot because you
Yeah.
could start selling symbols without having a dealer network
Right.
because
Right.
dealers can't stock 25 brands of symbols.
Right. Right.
You know?
Right. Wow.
But the
Wow.
nuts and bolts of it were not my favorite part. The favorite part was the design, the musicality, the symbols, and the artist.
That's great. Wow.
I
That's
was
fantastic.
privileged to be able to do that. And I
A
interviewed
simple-minded guy.
Simple money guy. I interviewed Remo Belli once, and he was at the Remo factory, and he was walking around playing with this little toy around his neck that they were giving out at the Rose Bowl parade because they were sponsors. And I said, Remo, I'm just going to guess here, but I think you're more involved with the creative element of this and less enamored of the nuts and bolts. And he said, yeah, exactly right. He had good. Brock Carricker was the president now. There's a new guy now. Then there's a new guy now. But
Uh-huh.
Remo was like a visionary. He liked to work on the creative side.
Wow. And he just happened to end up being the head honcho of the
Yeah.
business
Well, he
side.
was a great drummer in his own right. He was. Sorry about that.
Was Louis Belson part of Remo at one point too?
Right. When he came out with the PTS drums, Louis was part of
Right.
that. And he was some kind of vice president or something. I think he had an office there at Remo.
I heard
Wow.
that PTS was an error that became an entire scene in itself. They were making a
Right.
bunch of heads, and somehow they already came out by some fluke tensioned.
Okay.
So they already were pre-tensioned, so you could just put them on any kind of cylinder,
Shell could be
and they
anything.
already had a tone without having to be tuned.
Right. But then they
And
found
then,
that.
so the
Go
shell,
ahead.
you could make the shell out of like cardboard or puppy chow or
Right.
something, and just like latch it on to
But what
something.
they found was that the drummers didn't want to pre-tune heads; they
Right,
wanted to tune them
right,
themselves. So
right.
Remo made lemonade out of lemons because he took that same acousticon stuff, the paper mache shit it was made out of, whatever it was,
Hmm.
and he made all those percussion instruments. I went to a clinic once where Arthur Hall was talking about drum circles, and he said, "Let me show you this djembe," and he threw it across the ballroom, and he just went and picked it up, and it was fine. And then his fascination through his wife, I think, and I think his son was a physician too, with health and wellness. So they got into all that stuff with percussion and instruments that are made for just facilitating health.
Therapy
Wow.
and things like that.
Yeah,
No
he was he
kidding.
was
Incredible.
he was brilliant.
A
Well,
mistake became the opportunity.
Yeah.
how did those drums? I used to see ads for Louis Bellson playing those
Hmm.
drums, and
Hmm.
and up to that point he had been playing, Rogers and Slingerland and
Yeah, he was with
Pearl and
Pearl.
Greg's,
Right,
all the major drum companies. When I was a kid, Louis
right.
Bellson was,
Yeah,
huge
right
drum
up there with
star.
Buddy. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a
Yeah.
huge drum star. I can just remember, those names at that time. Louis was, and my dad had a Louis Bellson record too, Concerto for Drums, that I
Mm.
used to listen to a lot as well. And I got a chance to meet Louis 4 or 5 different times. What a sweet guy,
What a
man.
sweetheart.
He
Couldn't
was the
find a
he,
nicer guy.
oh man, he was the best, man. But I never really heard any of those drums. What did they sound like?
Well, the funny thing is, Jeff Hamilton was an endorser of theirs, and people
Hmm.
would always go to me, "Why does Jeff play those Remo drums? Gets a great sound though." They would always follow it up with that, and I would say, "Well, I think you might have just answered your own question, my friend."
The painter, not the brush.
Oh my gosh! Wow. So they don't exist anymore, though.
No, they
That
discontinued
stuff.
them. They discontinued
Oh,
him, and Jeff went with Mapex after that.
oh wow! Yeah. I mean, I never actually got a chance to see a set or hear them in person. So
I
I
had
was
them
always
and
wondering.
I had them in my practice room when I lived in L.A.
Uh
and
huh.
they were fine for that. I mean, I wouldn't go out and gig with them, but they were fine.
But those guys were actually going out and gigging then.
I heard Belson at Dante's with a big band playing that kit, his kit
Wow.
of that stuff. I mean, they sounded fine. You just couldn't, they were what they were. You're not going to change them.
Wow. Well, I mean, in Louis Bellson's
Fascinating.
hands, anything could sound good with that guy, man. Yeah,
Amen, baby.
I still have a pair of his. Uh, when I met him, I met him in I think it was in Switzerland as well. It was the Bern Jazz Festival. He was there with his wife and everything, and Pearl Bailey.
Right.
And I went up to him, and I was just so thrilled to meet him. And I told him about this record that my dad had that I used to listen to all the time called Concerto for Drums. And on this record, he's playing some drum solos, and he's got these sticks that have these little tambourine cymbals on them called
The
jingle
jingle
sticks.
sticks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he designed a lot of those things.
yeah. So I told him, I said, man, I love that record. I love those jingle sticks. And he reached right in his bag
I handed
and
them to you.
gave me a pair. They're in the packaging and everything. You know, I still have them. I have them up on my snare drum up there. And I fool around with them, but I don't want to mess them up. And they're pretty crude. There's just like a screw and a
Right.
couple of little cymbals stuck onto them. But
Later
he
on, it
was
was
so cool.
copied. I think Regal Tip had the hand barine. I think it was called. It was a short stick with
Yeah.
jingles in it. But the important thing is that it was from Louis, and you loved it for that reason. You don't even want to
Yeah,
play them.
he just reached in his bag right then
Yeah.
and there, after, 2 or 3 minutes of me, like, just pouring my heart out to him because I loved him so much,
Well, he gave me to the right guy. He gave me to the right guy. I met Elvin once at a trade show, and I walked up and I didn't know what to say. What am I say, man? You play good. So I just said, "I love you, man." And he went, "Me too, brother," and tapped my hand, and it was, he was just wonderful.
Yeah, those guys were Elvin was so sweet to me too. Like the first time I met him, I sat up in his dressing room at Blues Alley for the whole break.
Mm.
and his wife Keiko brought me lemonade, and he was of course drinking Heinekens, and
Mm.
you know, and he was answering all my stupid questions. You know, how come you don't play Gretchen anymore? And you know, because he was playing Camcos at that
Camcos, right?
time.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was
Little
like,
Yamaha
"Don't
deal.
worry, you got good drums. Don't worry, I had a situation where I needed to, get some drums, and and blah blah blah. You know,
Yeah,
it was
people
really
don't
great.
realize that they need support. Those artists need support. When
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had the company, I fully realized that. They need support. They need a set of drums somewhere tomorrow, and you got to be
Right,
able to
right.
handle it.
I think that was his situation. He had to buy a set of drums off the
Hmm.
shelf
Hmm.
somewhere, and that's what he saw because that was the sizes that he needed or whatever. And then later on, he struck up a deal with. At that time, I guess they were part Tama and part. It was Camco by Tama, I think, at that time, right?
Tama had bought the Camco thing. Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't
Something
because
know a
like
they
lot
had
of
the
that.
that,
foot pedal and the whole bit that said Camco by Tama.
Right,
but
right.
Lombardi ended
Yeah.
up buying that stuff too. I think later on,
Well, it was
but
something
I don't
like, I
follow all
think
that.
he got the tooling or something
Yeah,
because
Oh,
of the
the
lugs and stuff like
DW,
that.
the
Right. Yeah.
DW thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, anyway,
But
Elvin was
these
super
guys,
nice.
they were very giving,
yeah,
I would say that
to say the least.
everyone that I met that was my idol
yeah.
was just like an idol that you
Me,
would want them to be.
me too, me too. And I had to
Beautiful
Everyone.
interview.
people.
We had to interview Billy Cobham, and I never met him before. And I thought, holy, this is Billy Cobham, man. I'm not worthy, And he was as gracious as he could be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Amen, baby.
I'm with
That's why
two of
they
the
play
best.
like that.
Yeah, I'm with two of the best in the world today, and I sure appreciate both of you.
All right,
Adam,
thank you,
my
man.
esteemed colleague and co-host, and I'm sorry, the incredible Billy Drummond, who is my new friend.
Thank you so much for having me, guys, and look
Thank you
forward to
for
speaking
making the
with you
show.
again.
Yeah, we'll do some
Okay.
more together, man. All right.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Ciao. Ciao,
Aloha.
ciao. Ciao, ciao.
Take care. Let's just hope for peace in the world.
Oh, you got that right, man. All
Amen.
right. Ciao, ciao.